going to talk about the concept of inside baseball, but I'm going to talk almost nothing about baseball. I'm talking about the concept, inside baseball and inside writing fantasy fiction, and you can apply this to, I'll mention a history book, and some years ago, when I started looking at YouTube videos, I came across several, some of which are still on YouTube, several that were highly critical of this book and this author. And that surprised me. And only recently did I go back and look at the remaining videos and look at this book again. And I thought, those complaints are all inside baseball. Now, the concept is if you're inside what is being done traditional, you're in that mindset. If somebody comes along that's at all out of that mindset, you're not going to like it. That's just conventional human nature. But if you're not inside baseball, and if you're not inside fantasy, then whatever the issue is means little to you. It's not even worth your time to try to figure out what they're upset about. So I did, thinking I don't care about fantasy fiction formula. You are a fantasy fiction writer. If you look at this, I've probably not read your work. I read about fantasy fiction before the turn of the millennium because I had to write a review for the Mensa Bulletin. The video previous to this, I mentioned that writing for the Mensa Bulletin, I did a review of Rand's book, and I did a review of Tolkien's book. And I mentioned, usually just a line about the others on the Mensa best books list. It's 58 in the long list. I mentioned 12, the top 12 in the my other video. But 2 years ago, I put up this video, February 12th, 2023. It hasn't primarily about Foster Harris's book on writing commercial short stories. So the OU professional writing program, that's written by Foster Harris. The basic patterns of plot. He was replaced by Walter S. Campbell, who had a couple books, 1940s, writing magazine fiction in 1950. Then 1965, Dwight Swain. I've left out Jack Bickham, who I like, and I think his book Twister is really outstanding. He did some good work, and he was a good teacher. I'm informed he's a good teacher. And then Deborah Chester. Now, I guess the others probably didn't have access to these other books, so they'd be critical of them. But, I remember reading this, and one of the things that the others complained about, it really upset them. But I read it years ago when I read it, and a few years ago, and I thought, well, she's wrong about that. And then I moved on. It didn't subtract from the book in total for me because I'm not inside baseball. one of the complaints about the book was said, well, it's a good book about writing, but it's not very helpful about fantasy in particular. Now, having been traditionally published, it's entirely possible that they chose this title, but the marketing division chose this title. In fact, it likely that I don't know that she would have put that on the book if it was up to her. She had written 40 fantasy novels, so that's probably what they said. Okay, you're a fantasy writer. Nobody who's not a fantasy writer is going to want to read it. I read it because I was reading all the books in the from the OU professional writing directors, and and she was the latest. I don't know if she's still there or not. Anyway, she said basically, don't do this. And when I read it, I laughed. She's wrong about that. It's a very helpful thing to do. And that's the others, it really upset them. They said, there should be more, you should do that, and there should be more about writing fantasy in particular. So, so I disagree with the critics, and I disagree, but it doesn't bother me. I mean, their videos. That's why I'm not sharing them. I don't think you would benefit by watching them. Now I'm going back 45 years to a history course I took at Wichita State University, taught by H. Craig Minor, PhD. He was very well respected in the Wichita region as a historian. And when I took his class, I was already aware he had a good reputation, and I realized he's not that good a teacher. Nice guy, and that's why he had the reputation. Which is why when I made an appointment to talk to him, he was polite. And I brought the textbook, history book that he had assigned to us. And I pointed out a few colossal errors, not just picadillos, but big errors. And he's shaking his head. Yeah, I didn't read this thoroughly before signing it. There's another reason, and I probably was pressured by somebody in the business department to select that particular book. And he again talked about the concept of the bell curve, and most of it's right. You know, I had only found a handful of errors in the book, and although the first one was a real doozy. And he said every book's like that, the bell curve. Most of it's right, but on the tails, you're going to find some errors. Says I've never none of my all of my books have some errors, and there's the thing about nonfiction, you're going to have some errors creep in there, even with the army of fact checkers. So it's probably this title is probably a market decision, and what was in the book that Minor had us read for a history book, it's probably a market decision. And traditional publishers don't get to make all those decisions. They don't decide the title and so forth. Title's usually decided last. Whatever your working title is may not be the final title. So I'm just kind of defending. It's not just Deborah Chester's book here. I mean, every nonfiction book, they're very likely an error, but it's very rare the error is intentional and malevolent. But if you're inside baseball, it's going to upset you a lot more than the people who are not inside baseball. So, myself, yeah, I give her a pass on these opinions she shared. Um, Others clearly do not, but I urge you to go. Arthur C. Clarke actually talked to me about this. I think he wrote this that, most things that are in error, they're not malevolent. They're just, a typo there's an error, a misunderstanding. So this is otherwise, I think everyone would praise this about writing fiction, genre fiction, formula fiction that have, traditional features.